What is your American dream? What does that look like for you and your family?
My American dream is my life.
Welcome to House Calls with Dr. Connie, and I have a special guest today. July is a very special month. It's in the heat of summer. A lot of excitement, a lot of fireworks, as we know, in Washington, D.C. and in the news. Definitely a lot of fireworks. But I want to talk this show and about the topic about America, because July is the month of America's birthday. It's 249th birthday, in fact. And there are a lot of special things about our country, despite what a lot of the negative media says, that I'm going to highlight today as somebody whose family emigrated legally to this country. So let me start off with my honorable mentions for the month of July. I always like to welcome new people into the world. And one of the newest members arrived in my family was my fifth grandchild, and third grandson was born on the 18th of July. His name is Parker William Stevens. So welcome to this life, little Parker. I can't wait to see you and meet you personally in a few days. The other wonderful thing this month was his parents, Jason and Aaliyah Stevens, in Minnesota, celebrated their fifth wedding anniversary. So happy anniversary, you two. Also, this is definitely Dr. Connie's family July celebration month. My daughter-in-law, Erin Stevens, has had a birthday this month. Happy birthday. Very close friends, Dr. Richard Tubb, happy birthday. Ray Williams, married to my best friend, Maddie Williams, has a birthday. McKenna Lamourie and Melissa Landsman Gordon, who work in my practice, celebrating July birthdays. My oldest grandchild, Addie Stevens, will be 10 years old this month. Happy birthday, Addie. She has been on my show at least 2 times, interviewed about the holidays and Christmas, and so she's definitely a natural on the camera and on the microphone. And we're just lining her up for a future in broadcasting. My sister-in-law, Valerie, has a birthday. Dr. Lucy Harris at Mayo, Dr. Jerry Evidente, Diane Adler, Jeannie Damon, a dear friend of mine in Florida, celebrating this month. Christine Gannett, Chrissy Pacheco, who runs a concierge nursing practice in Scottsdale. Happy birthday. Dr. Asha Devereaux, who is a concierge internal medicine pulmonary doctor in Coronado, California, who I met when she and her husband were residents in San Diego in their program. John Ellsworth, Joyce Sullivan, Harvey Alpert, Joanne McDowell, Marcia Meyer, Elina Pepper, who's going through medical school. Happy birthday, Elina. Lori Adams, a former neighbor of mine. Maria Colpin in Fountain Hills. Dr. Dina George, who did a show about kindness. Happy birthday. Dennis Dugan, Jerry Kemp, Vita Rowe, dear friend of mine. Cliff Russell. Dr. Daniel Amen of the Amen Clinics, celebrated this month. Vicki Logan, Megan Lightman. Dr. Todd Hurst, who's been on my show about cardiology. Happy birthday. Carol Martin, Emily Adelman, Patty Good, Kay Scaglione. So happy birthday to all of you this amazing month. So as I mentioned, this is the month of America's birthday, the 249th birthday of this amazing country. There's no other country like ours. And I wanted to dedicate this podcast to becoming an American, what that means, and the struggle to become an American. And a lot of times, people who are born here don't appreciate that. And the people who come over legally, why it's a struggle and why it's important that we have rules and laws that regulate who becomes an American and who comes into our country. And I know there's been a lot of fighting over the last couple of years about the open borders and people coming through. And I just think back on Ellis Island, and these people came over on the boats, but they knew who was coming over. They documented who was coming over, and they knew, why they were here. But there was a reason they were here, but there were rules and regulations that allowed them to enter and become American citizens. So I've been very blessed to have traveled to over 100 countries in my 70 years of life. I did not start off here in America. I was born on a Navy base in Sangley Point in the town of Cavite, Philippines. My father and mother were Filipino by birth. My father joined the U.S. Navy in the 1940s, At that time, the Philippines and the United States had an agreement that if you were Filipino male, you could join the U.S. Navy as a serviceman, and they would give you a job, an opportunity to become an American citizen. And so my father joined, just like his uncles and brothers all joined. So we have a proud tradition of service to the U.S. Navy. And one time I counted how many years of service my family, the Mariano side, has had serving the U.S. military, Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard. And we've had over 200 years of service to our country here in America. So I was not born on American soil, but because my father was a naturalized American citizen at the time of my birth, I was considered American citizen by being born as a dependent child of an active duty serviceman who was American citizen by naturalization on foreign soil. So that's how I became an American citizen. But I think a lot of it too, my birth certificate and my papers will say American citizen. That's what my passport is. But a lot of the identity is, who am I? Because people will look at me everywhere I go and they'll go, so what country are you from? And I still remember the story. I was living in Port Hueneme. I was stationed at Port Hueneme, California. I was living in Westlake Village with my first husband, the father of my two sons. And I was pregnant with my first child, Andrew. And I was in military uniform. And if you're active duty Navy, they have the most unappealing khaki uniforms that are maternity. And I was a lieutenant commander at the time. And I had my khaki uniform on with the collar decals, big old uniform. And I think I was probably 8 or 9 months pregnant. And I went to go visit a patient of mine who was active duty, but they had admitted him to the local civilian hospital in Oxnard. And as I was coming out of the hospital in my military uniform, my khaki outfit, my hair up in a bun, one of the local people walked up to me and looked at my uniform and said, "What country do you represent?" And I smiled and I said, "United States of America." And so I've always lived with the feeling that I never fit in. Part of it is I never fit anybody's particular stereotype because I just love to blast people's stereotypes of what they think I am. And it's usually less than what I am. So I just smile, and you have to have a sense of humor, but you have to educate them in a way that they go, "Oh my gosh, so you were an American?" I said, "Yeah, I was, it says, well, your English is really good." I said, "Well, I've lived here like most of my life." And yes. So I just think it's quite interesting, but it's part of our identity. And I consider myself an American by choice, but also because by birth, as my mother and father were American citizens, but also my identity is American, but I'm blessed to have Filipino roots, of which I don't deny, of which I'm very proud. We all have some place that we consider the motherland, right? If you were born in the U.S., well, are you Texan? Are you from Southern California? Are you from New England? Where's your identity? But overall, I'm American with Filipino roots. That's your roots and your wings. And so I always find it interesting that people, I never quite fit that stereotype. And I just smile, and you just have to look at it. But that's really a lot of my American journey, is the fact that my father joined the U.S. military. And I lived here, and I grew up here, and every 2 or 3 years I traveled. And then when I had my children, who were half Caucasian, they look a little bit more American. And then when you look at my grandchildren, of which there are 1/4 Filipino, I laugh because when I go to Hawaii with them, my youngest granddaughter is very fair. It's got red hair, blue eyes, very light skinned, and I'm holding her and I'm very tan. And people automatically assume I'm the Filipina nanny, and it's actually very cute. So, but I think a lot of it is identity. How do you identify, and really, what is your country? And so I really think it's a blessing. I never take it for granted that I am an American by birth, but that I am an American citizen. That is truly a special thing. And so many people want to come here, but I still believe in the rule of law. We are a nation of laws and regulations, and that the only way to do that is to follow the law. And that's really it. And people can have kind hearts about, bringing everybody in. Everybody should come over, partake of America. Absolutely. We're the land of opportunity. But you have to follow the rules. If I wanted to move to Switzerland, which I love, and become a Swiss citizen, I can't just show up, right? Just say, hey, I'm here. I'm just going to live here. If I wanted to work there, if I want to become a Swiss citizen, there's certain rules. They want you to invest so much in their economy. They want you to take a test, obviously be interviewed, and you have to speak their language. They're not going to change for you. You're going to have to change for them. So we live in a world of rules, and rules are there for a reason. And if people don't like the rules, follow the process to change the rules legally, because we are a land that believes in law and rules. So I think of what this birthday means, and I look at all the different countries in the world, and truly, when I think of America as one nation under God, I think that separates us from many other countries that were founded by monarchies, by hierarchies, by families that took over, or by dictatorships that are socialist or communist that are ruled. But if you truly believe one nation under God, then you have to believe who we are there to serve when we come into this country of our choice, that God is very much embedded in our Constitution and the history of our country, that a lot of it was for religious freedom and how we honored and worshiped God. So I think about that, and I thought, well, who would I interview for this show, talking about how precious it is to become an American and why the struggle. And I thought of our special guest today, who I've known for the last probably 3 or 4 years, at least 5 years. He's corrected. And I've known our guest for 5 years, and I met him here in Scottsdale 5 years ago. And he and his family have become dear friends of mine. But I'm going to introduce you. He's been on my show before, and his story is really a highlight of the American journey as he becomes in that struggle to become an American citizen. Hugo Rodriguez is a good friend of mine. He's a true gem. I call him the Lord of the Rings, since he is a magnificent jeweler and maker of gems and jewelry and rings and necklaces and the most amazing artwork. He's been in the jewelry industry for over 27 years. It started off when he was a little boy, and he was fascinated by jewelry, watching his mother sell jewelry to her friends. But when he was growing up, it never crossed his mind that he would be one day designing jewelry and selling it in his own business in America, which was amazing. Very different from where he grew up in Mexico. So after graduating from high school, Hugo was given the opportunity to work in a silver jewelry store, and that revived his passion for precious stones and metals. And so in 1999, he opened his own store in Chihuahua City in Mexico, where he worked while also graduating from college. So then several years later, he moved to the United States to open a store here in Scottsdale, Arizona, where I got a chance to meet him. So I see him as somebody who's very gifted, artist, talented, savvy businessman, in a lot of ways a patriot, very much who consider a good American, law-abiding, pays his taxes, and he contributes to America in many ways. Because it's about not only coming here, but contributing to this country and making it better, because you're giving back to this country. And so he's in the process of becoming an American citizen now. He was a guest on my podcast on House Calls in February 2023, when I asked him about the gift of love. And we talked about his jewelry and his expression of love and the symbolism of jewelry in our society. So we go from the gift of love to the gift of America, and he's here today to share his American journey. So welcome, Hugo.
Thank you so much, Dr. Connie, for having me back at your show.
It's good
really
to have you. It's good to have you here.
It's good to be here.
Every time I see you and you share coming to America, your story and your family's story of just coming here and what's so important, I think people should hear this, because I think they forget the ones who are doing all the right things and following the rules to come here. So why here? Why did you decide? I mean, you were in Mexico, your family was there, everyone was there, you had a business, but why come here?
I think it was embedded on me since I was little, and I didn't realize that this is what I wanted to do up until probably 25 years ago when I started coming to just to visit more often. I remember we came to visit my parents, who they live in Texas, and I was married already with my wife. We had our little daughter, and we came to a jewelry store, and I said to Claudia, looking at the store, I told her, one day I'm going to have something like this here in the United States. And just, I said it just because I felt it that way. And words are so powerful, either positive or negative words, that 6 months later, I was here in Scottsdale opening my first store in the country.
Isn't it amazing?
So, and I think on retrospective, and I wasn't thinking how I was going to do it, but I said it, and God took care of the rest of bringing me over to realize that I had the talent of designing jewelry and opening up my first venture in the U.S.
Isn't it amazing? You know, we talk about the American dream. That is your American dream, right? Is that?
Definitely, there is no doubt about it. When we first moved to the States, obviously we had a regular visa, which allows you to have a business as long as you don't operate the business. You have to hire people. And then later on, you take different avenues or different options of visas to be here legally. So after opening the business, I applied 3 times for an investor visa, and I was denied. So it came the point that my wife had to go back when our second child was born and wait in Mexico while I was getting our visa paperwork done. So finally we did it the fourth time, and we got approved.
Why did they turn it down?
So it's very bureaucratic, and at that time, we're talking about 2003, 2004, they just didn't want to prove it, or they were putting more requirements than they needed it. And it's funny because one consulate deny it, and another consulate approve it.
Do you hire like an immigration attorney or have
Yes.
somebody guiding you?
Yes, I hire an immigration attorney, and it's funny because I change attorneys 2 or 3 times because it's a process that you need an attorney. And I had an attorney, or I had attorneys for almost 20 years, Dr. Connie, that when I held my E2 visa, and finally I applied for a green card to become a permanent resident through the business, but not specifically just having a business, but proving the U.S. government that you are contributing to something for a greater good for the country. And that's how I was blessed and able to become a permanent resident over 2 years ago. So now the next step is becoming a U.S. citizen that I can't wait to do it.
So what does that involve now? What do you have to do? You've got 3 years. You take a written test, you do an interview, you do.
So there are 2 ways. When you apply for a green card, that you are sponsored by a family member, after you become a permanent resident, you have to wait 3 years to apply for U.S. citizenship. But in my case, because I applied for a green card through a job, I have to wait 5 years.
Oh, wow.
So it makes it a little bit longer to wait, but it's going to be well worth it. So once the
Yeah.
5 years after you become a permanent resident are up, you have to apply. You have to fill up an application and take your turn, and immigration will call you. You do it through an attorney, and you have to take a test. So the test is you have to study the history of the U.S. And when they interview you, they will ask you a few questions. And once you answer those questions, they welcome you as a U.S. citizen.
Wow. It's a big deal, isn't it?
It's a big deal.
It's a big
It's a
deal.
long journey.
Yeah.
When I think on retrospective, we waited almost 20 years to become permanent residents.
So you and your whole family? It also covers the whole family, or just
So,
you?
because I was the sponsor of my wife and my oldest children before she turned 21, they were under my umbrella. And we are very grateful and fortunate that the other two children were born here in the U.S.
So they're American citizens.
They are American citizens by birth.
Yeah, they were here with that. And then your mom and dad in Texas are,
Yeah, soon they will be
same thing.
U.S. citizens.
You know, it's amazing. It's a long process. So you're doing this long process. I'm going to ask you later in the interview, well, how do you feel about people just come across the border and say, I'm here, I'm not leaving? So it's like cutting in front of the line. And so there's a lot of emotional things. And I think
Correct.
a lot of people who go through the process that of following the rules are not very happy when people bypass that whole system of
Correct.
coming into our country and saying, oh, I'm here, I'm not leaving, and finding out a lot of them are illegal, not only illegal, but are wanted elsewhere in other countries for breaking the law. But we're going to take a quick break on our show, and I'll come back and chat with Hugo Rodriguez about his American journey. I also want to talk about the American dream and what that means to you. So stay tuned on Dr. Connie's House Calls, where we talk about God Bless America. Stay tuned. Welcome back to God Bless America on Dr. Connie's House Calls, celebrating the month of July, but also our wonderful country. And our special guest is Hugo Rodriguez from Mexico, originally from Mexico, and he is now he's a permanent resident of the United States in the process, the very long process of becoming an American citizen. And it's a long struggle. You know, you almost want to say, hey, can I just come through the border in the previous administration, just get to the head of the line? But, you know, you have to follow the rules. You know, as a
Correct.
businessman, you can't just set up on the street corner. You follow the rules. But we were talking about, you know, your American dream and your children. And were there times that, you know, your time living here and being in the U.S., did anybody ever question you while you're here? Did you ever get that from people?
No.
So nobody's ever run up to you and say, are you illegal, or what are you doing here?
So in my 20 plus years of living here, you know, people, or better said, uneducated people are everywhere in every country, and they come in all shapes, forms, and colors. I have had twice that they asked me if I was here legally. Obviously, at the beginning, I got riled up, but later I learned how to respond or kill them with kindness.
Yes, just smile. Yeah.
And that's pretty much the two events that have happened.
And then your children, you know, two of them grew up here. But when you
The
see
three of them.
Yeah, grew up here. Two were born here. So your oldest is Mexican. She's also a permanent resident.
Correct.
You know, and when you look at them, they're Hispanic, right? Latino, Hispanic.
Yes.
Does anyone ever give them a hard time, or why are you here? They ever gotten any of that?
We have asked them if they ever have encountered any situations like the one you're describing. And as of today, they never have had anybody asking them or treating them differently because of their look, which is, it's a blessing, right? We always make sure to let our children where they came from, the Mexican roots, and that they should be proud who they are and the heritage that they carry, and always be proud of it.
Absolutely. You know, I look back at my 68 years here living on the mainland of the U.S. because I came over from the Philippines when I was 2. And definitely in the 60s, when my father was stationed at the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C., in the 60s, during the Civil Rights Movement, living on the East Coast. And I remember we went to Catholic school, and in those days, they had you sell chocolate bars, and you go door to door. And here you're wearing the parochial school uniform of St. Thomas More, and you're selling the chocolate bars for like 50 cents. And literally, we have people opening the doors, looking up and down, slamming the doors in our face, right? Or this back then, they would say, you should go back to where you came from, right? Or, I mean, but as time went up, you see less and less of it. The last time I experienced it was actually during COVID. In 2019, I went over to my bank to make a deposit, and I parked my car, and beside me was another car with the window down. And there was an African-American man in the passenger side, and he goes, hey. I said, excuse me? He says, are you Chinese? I said, no, I'm American. And it was like, and I think he was trying to say, the Chinese, you must be part of the COVID people.
Correct.
And I'm looking at him like, dude, what are you talking about? So that was, but you're right. I think ignorance comes in all shapes and sizes. And, how do you respond when somebody is stupid or uneducated and you don't give them stupid back, which is the tendency to yell at them.
Correct.
You just are, as you know, very nice. You smile. One time I was at a shop and we heard an altercation in the street, and somebody cut somebody off, and they were flipping each other, and they were yelling at each other. And then finally somebody said, God bless you, Jesus loves you. And they drove off. And it was like the other person didn't know what to say.
Correct. Because
So you just don't engage, because if you're a jerk back, they're just going to think you're a jerk. But if you say, listen, let me educate you, this is what we're about. And you can't educate if you're yelling at somebody, because they're not going to hear you. They're just going to be defensive.
correct.
But, what is your American dream? What does that look like for you and your family?
My American dream is my life,
Yeah.
is what we are living as a family in the last 22 years, that God has blessed us so much and have allowed us to be in this beautiful country where I discovered my talent of designing jewelry. And not only that, I've been able to put that into the creativity of designing jewelry, where my clients, including you, wear my pieces, and they are able to show my designs and my talent again to others. And it has become one of the greatest blessings in my life.
It's amazing because you do have a gift, and it's even more special because we know you. But even if we didn't know you, if we saw your product, we're like, we love it, right? And so it doesn't discriminate. It just looks at the product itself, that what you're contributing, what people have value. And it's important. In other words, it has value, not necessarily because who made it, but because they see it. It's intrinsic to how beautiful it is. But you look at your children, and each of them, you have the oldest one completing college. Can you share a little bit about what they're going to do, what their education has led them to do?
It's a very interesting story because her name is Mariano. She's 23 years old.
Yeah.
When we came to the country, she was 2.5 years old. She didn't speak any English. And my wife was struggling to find the right school. And I say my wife because she was at home taking care of the children while I was at work trying to make it happen. And finally, my wife found the right school, St. Timothy Catholic School, and my daughter got enrolled there. It was the only school where she didn't cry, and she didn't speak a word of English. So the teachers had to give her some sort of incentive, like a star on the forehead or things like that, when she said one word in English. Well, a month or 2 months went by, and one day, Mariana just started speaking like a native,
Yeah, yeah.
natural. So that was 22 years ago, and well, I'm sorry, less than that. And now she just graduated in May from architecture in the University of Arizona. She has a formal job. She works for an architecture firm here in Scottsdale, and she's doing great. She's
That's amazing.
designing a restaurant right now, and to me,
That's amazing.
that is the American dream.
Absolutely. And then your other daughter.
Our middle daughter Natalia, she's studying nutritional science. She will graduate next year from the University of Arizona. And our youngest boy Hugo, he's going into his second year of business and finance in Arizona State University. So if you think again in retrospective, what would be the odds of coming from a foreign country that a daughter of an immigrant, without speaking any English or any word, now she's fully merged into the culture. She's bilingual. She's proud of her heritage. She's proud of her country of origin. And now she's an architect.
Amazing. She's lived the dream. But I think when I talk to immigrants who come over and work hard, there are many in the Filipino community. Last week, I was the keynote at the community of Filipino organizations here in town. There are 550 Filipinos. And I would say over many, 75, 80% of them are American citizens. And they came here to do their professions, many in healthcare, nursing homes, business. One of them was a vascular surgeon trained here. His wife's a businesswoman. And their children raised here. And they all are just so blessed. I think there's a sense of gratitude because we had the opportunity. Just give us a chance. I don't expect any special treatment. Just give me a chance to show my stuff is what we're asking.
Correct.
We want a hand up, not a handout. And I think there's certain pride. But when you go to the immigrants, they're one of the hardest working people. And I think in the Filipino culture, people who come here, work together, they pool their assets, they all live in one house, they're all working. And actually, in that culture, they send money home. They send money back to the Philippines to support the family there. But they're here making a living, they're here legally, but they're also very grateful for this country.
Correct.
There's no perfect place, but still, when you look at all the other countries, you chose this.
Absolutely. I have had the opportunity to travel the world, and I love traveling. Is one of my passions. And I love other countries. I love Europe. I love Italy is my favorite country to visit. And if you think like, okay, I want to move there, but once you're there and you live like part of the community, you realize how good we have it here in the United States. We have this thing called freedom that is hard to find in other countries. And you have the ability, if you go broke today, you have the ability to start off tomorrow and probably make double of what you did before. So it's really, God has blessed the United States of America for a reason. The roots and the foundation of the country is Judeo-Christian, and that's why I think the country has been successful for almost 250 years.
It is an amazing story. I always look about what did you give back? It's one thing to come here, but what did you contribute to the organization, to the country that you came? How did you give back? And, I think of my parents. My dad died about 6 years ago, over 6 years, 7 years ago. My mother died 10 years ago. And, they hardly spoke English. He was American serviceman. He worked in the homes of admirals. But rather than retire in the Philippines, they retired in California. And his biggest dream, his American dream, was that his children all be educated and that he would buy a Cadillac. And at the time he died, almost at age, he almost made it to 94, had a big shiny old Cadillac that he would clean and wax every single day, even though he couldn't drive it anymore. And then when he passed, I was actually very surprised because my brother was the executor of the estate. And my father grew up in a very poor family. His mother died when he was 11. His father was a tailor on the island of Corregidor. He was one of 7 children, second oldest. And then his father remarried, and the second wife had 7 more children, so there were 14 of them. But my dad and his brothers, all 5 of them, the first set, all joined the U.S. Navy. And so my father and mother saved money. They didn't believe in debt. They paid everything off. Everything. They didn't use a credit card. They put money away. And at the time he died, he left behind about $2 million in assets.
Wow.
But he's the type, he'd go to a restaurant and he wouldn't buy things because of the price. He would always look at the price. He was, no, I can't afford it. He would eat at home. But it's the fact that he did that. And nobody would know. I mean, he had no debt. He bought 2 pieces of real estate, the house he lived in for 50 some years, and then he had another house he rented out. And that was all part of his assets.
That's amazing.
But he wanted us, leave that, and after estate tax and California tax, divide them up on the kids. But what he left us, the most precious, was his work ethic, is that no job is beneath you, and that you'll find a way to work, that make a living. Don't expect someone's going to give you a handout, that you're going to get off your butt and work. And it's about getting that opportunity. And it's about your purpose. The kids who get everything they want are never happy. And I see this in my practice among my very affluent families who are trust fund kids, who have great education, all the things they want, but don't have any work, no purpose. They're like perpetual consumers, but they're never happy.
Correct, because they're trying to fill the void.
Yeah.
With other things.
So what did you give back? How did you contribute to the greater good to be a better place? How did you help others who don't have what you have? But I think for you, your children with their gifts, that your dream was your talent. What is your talent? How can you give back is to the creative aspects of your joy. But you're also a businessman, you're an entrepreneur. It takes a lot of guts to set up a business. It's hard. Most businesses fail in the first 5 years. Only a very small number succeed.
I'm very blessed, and God has given me everything that we have. Well, He has loaned it, because at the end of the day, everything belongs to Him. It's hard to be a designer and then a good businessman and then good salespeople and then run the HR department.
Everything.
So, everything. Going back to your question, how you give back, it's something that I always have had very clear, that nothing belongs to me, and if God gives me, I owe to give back to the community. I love to contribute to different organizations throughout the valley, or even national organizations that when they come and request a donation or things like that, Catholic organizations.
And the Boys and Girls Club.
Boys and Girls.
Yeah, you've really helped them.
So we like to give a piece or two of jewelry so they can raffle it out and then raise the funds for them to keep. And it's one of the ways that I find to give back to the community, among other things that we do behind curtains that as a family.
If you look at the spiritual and truly a country that, if you believe in the strength of this country because the hand of God, you have to ask God, why am I an American? And I think it struck me when President Clinton did a state visit to the Philippines over 20 years ago. And we're in the motorcade. So there are about 28 cars in the motorcade, and I'm in the spare limousine, or the decoy, in front of the main limousine, which is behind me. And we're going through the streets of Tondo, which is probably the poorest side of Manila. And I'm sitting in the spare limousine. I'm looking out through the windows, and the doors are bulletproof glass. And along the side of the streets are little children in the Philippines. This is, again, the poorest side. they don't have shoes. They have slippers or they're barefoot. Many of them are crippled. And they're running in very tattered clothing, and they're coming along very slow motorcade, and they're touching the glass. They're touching, and I'm waving to, and they're waving, and it struck me is by the hand of God that I'm on this side of the limousine. I'm here. I could have easily been
Correct.
there. And so never take it for granted. Never feel entitled. And it's also a sense of humility that I'm only as good as what God allows me to be.
Correct.
And if you do that, it's interesting. In order to be greatly, successful, you have to humble yourself enough. It's the opposite. It's paradoxical. The greater I want to be, the more humble I need to be.
Correct.
You have to go the other way.
Yeah,
to be open to change.
Otherwise, God will smack you in the face, and then He will put you in your place.
Yeah.
That's the way He works.
Yeah, who do you think you are? I'll show you. But there's a lot, for this country to see how far it's gone for over those so many years. I look at presidential disability a lot, and our show last month was about illness in the president and the role of the president's doctor. And you think of this country, and at the time, the monarch was King George. And King George had bouts of madness. And there's a great movie called The Madness of King George.
Correct.
And at the time, he was struggling with porphyria, acute intermittent porphyria, which had moments of madness. And his doctor was trying to control him. The queen was trying to control him. And at that time, the colonies were acting up. So they had a very weakened monarch who didn't really care about the colonies. He just couldn't even keep his country together. But he was incapacitated. At the time of weakness, if the leader is weak, the country is weak.
Correct.
So you need a strong leader. And I think for me, having taken care of leaders, they're human like anybody else. And I've taken care of Democrats, Republicans. They're the same, you take care of your patient. That's what it is.
Correct.
But you pray for them. You pray for their health and you pray for the wisdom. But it really goes back to how this country, the founding fathers were brilliant. They were brilliant as how they set it up, about freedom of speech and the rules and laws and the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And I think everybody should read the Declaration of Independence, what gave this country, how amazing this country is and continues to be. So I thank you for coming to our show. I thank you for coming to America, bringing your family. And I thank you for going through the process and the sacrifice of, the steps that it takes to have the courage to do this. Because it is, you are fulfilling the dream to be here and to be American with roots in Mexico. We always honor our roots. We don't deny that.
Correct.
But we choose to become American. And so that is a company of our choice. But our identity is we have our special roots of origin. So thank you for being on our show, and thank you for becoming American.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you for allowing me to be here and to share part of my story to the rest.
Again. Well, thank you, and thank you for listening to House Calls for our July show. I would ask you to be grateful for this country. There's no other amazing country as we are. There are many good things about it. I would not live in any other country other than this country. And for people who criticize it, try to go to the other countries and see if you can find the same type of freedoms, especially freedom of speech, that other countries will not allow you to do. So I thank you for listening in, and I wish you a wonderful month, and God bless you all.